So, as Ashley mentioned, we met through the Chiari Project. I have a, I don't like to say disease or disability, but I have something called Chiari Malformation, and I always like to say I have Chiari. It doesn't have me. Um, so Ashley asked me to speak a little bit about my journey and how I coped. So here we go. So my journey. 2013, I had my first surgery. 2016, my second surgery, but currently now I'm fine and I'm living my life. All right, so Chiari malformation awareness is very important. It is misdiagnosed a lot. About 200,000 people a year are diagnosed, but I guarantee you there are many, many more who are suffering from it because it is, like the other ladies were saying, it's very hard to diagnose. The only way you can diagnose Chiari is through an MRI. And I just want to say clearly, I am not a Chiari expert on facts, but I am an expert on surviving it. So I won't give you a lot of numbers and things like that. Number one, I don't like numbers. Number two, I don't want to present as if I'm going to give you all the facts. I just want to share my journey, and hopefully if anyone's suffering from Chiari, they will feel motivated and understand that life can continue. Okay, my journey, how my journey began the first time. So I can say that my journey began in 2012, but my journey actually began at birth, which we found out later. So in September 2012, I had a really bad cold in August, and I couldn't get rid of my cough. I would just cough, and I had all kind of tests. I had my lungs x-rayed. I took an HIV test. I mean, any test you could think of because we couldn't get rid of the cough. One day I was at my job and I was working at a reproductive center in Atlanta, and I coughed and just slumped over. It was as if they thought I had died because I just slumped over. Luckily, we had an OR on site, and they took me to the OR. My blood pressure was 200 and something over 100 and something. And by the time they got me to our OR, I told them, hey, it feels like an elephant is sitting on my left side. So they rushed me to the hospital. They did something that maybe wasn't so smart, but the hospital was down the street. They were scared it would take the ambulance too long. And because we had nurses and doctors, they drove me to the hospital. By the time we got to the hospital, speaking began to be a little bit harder for me. I couldn't move my left side at all. And my mom always said the scariest thing was when she asked to speak to me, and I said as much as I could say, as audible as I could say it, Mommy, why is this happening to me? We didn't know. We clearly thought I was having a stroke. They even did the whole TPA protocol, the whole stroke protocol, x-rays, CAT scans. They did it. Yes, you've had an ischemic stroke is what I was told. 4 days in the ICU, 3 CAT scans, and 1 MRI. Finally, later, I heard the words for the first time, Chiari malformation. And again, like I said, the only way to diagnose Chiari is through an MRI. 4 days in the ICU with them treating me as if I had had a stroke. The doctors were baffled. One of the doctors I work with even came over to the hospital to try to talk to the doctors to understand. At this point, my speech is very affected. It's like my tongue was super thick, no feeling on my left side or movement on my left side. They kept saying, we know you've had a stroke. We know you've had a stroke, but we can't see it. So finally, one of the neurosurgeons came up and he said, let's give her an MRI because we need to see the area that this stroke is affecting. He came back and he said, you haven't had a stroke. You have something called Chiari malformation. I wasn't able to speak clearly, but I was able to get across, what are you talking about to him? So that was the first time I heard of Chiari. He predicted that I was born with it. The reason being, he asked me some questions. Did it hurt when I laughed? Yes. I remember as a child, I used to say, Mom, asked my mom and dad, why does it hurt to laugh? It's like I can't even be happy. If I coughed and had a cold, it lasted longer. I had the thick tongue thing several times before, but not as severe as this time. My mother would rush me to the hospital. They told her, oh, she's having an anxiety attack. She's depressed. She's this, because nobody ever did an MRI. So I was misdiagnosed. I will never forget when I lived in California the first time, same thing happened. I went to the hospital and the doctor said, we're going to give you some medicine. All of a sudden, I started feeling like my body, my left and right side were fighting. And I asked the doctor what he gave me, and I don't remember the name of it on purpose. But when I spoke to another doctor about it, he told me it was a psychotropic disease. I think I'm saying medicine, because they didn't believe me and they thought I was going crazy. In fact, I read an article about a lady who she was having symptoms. She was saying she was hurting, saying she had a headache. They kept going to the doctor. The doctor convinced her husband that she was mentally ill. They had her institutionalized. Thank goodness one of the doctors at the mental institution knew about Chiari, tested her, found out she had it, called her husband and said, come get your wife. She's not crazy. She has Chiari. So it's, they've told me I have fibromyalgia, I've had asthma, anything you can think of other than Chiari. So testing is important. I tell people, if you know your body, and if you feel like something is wrong, ask for more tests, you have that right. It's your body. Whether you have insurance or not, you're paying a bill. So definitely, push. And a lot of people are saying, well, I don't want to frustrate the doctor. Yeah, you don't have to be mean, but you do have to ask questions and ask for further. Hey, I'm not satisfied with, oh, there's nothing wrong. You just have anxiety. Anxiety is not a thick tongue. Anxiety is not my head hurting because I coughed or because I'm laughing. So how could I be having an anxiety attack or depression because I'm laughing and my head hurts? So always, don't be afraid to demand more testing and answers. And like I said, apparently I was born with it, and I thought you all just needed to see a baby picture of me. But apparently I was born with it, like I said, from the symptoms that I explained to the doctor. So what happens now? September 2012. That's the question me and my family had. With no health insurance at the time, to be able to afford my follow-up visits after being treated, all I had was Google. So I started Googling, trying to figure out everything, which sometimes can be the worst thing because you go to the worst case scenarios. And I have found that some of the community can be somewhat negative, and so it was not helping me. So I got off the internet, but this is how I basically initially learned about Chiari. 5 months later, I'm still, it takes me a little while. Maybe it took me about a month to get my total movement back and speech. But then I went back to work. Hey, I'm fine. My health insurance was going to kick in January. I'll go to the doctor then. We'll take care of it. He had already said you may need surgery or you may not. So I'm like, we'll deal with it in January. Insurance in January, make the appointment. February, I'm told that my mother has small cell lung cancer. She's never smoked a day in her life. So diagnosed with lung cancer. So naturally, I put myself on hold. It was no time for me. I had to focus on my best friend, my mommy. So my mom began her treatments. And then around May, I began to fall. I could be standing still and I would just fall. The speech thing wasn't bad again, but it was I had left side weakness, and literally I could just stand up and I would fall. And so I went to Emory University because I researched, and Dr. Daniel Barrow is one of the top in the world. So I went to Emory, ran some tests, and he confirmed again Chiari, and that it was getting worse. And I said, but my mom has cancer and she's in the midst of her treatments. Can I wait until her treatment's over? And he said, if you wait much longer, you may end up in a wheelchair. That was what I heard in May 2013. So having the best parents in the world, they said, we'll make this all work. My beautiful mother, and I'm gonna try to not to get emotional, but my beautiful mother said, listen, I'll come to Atlanta. I'll schedule it. I have 2 weeks in between my chemo and when my radiation starts. So her and my dad came to Atlanta. And July 23rd, 2013, I had my first decompression surgery. Chiari presents as the tonsils of your brain are stuck down in your spinal cord. Those of us with Chiari, we always say our brain is too big to contain, but the brain is there. So that's why when I coughed, it was like a double-edged sword. If I coughed, then it would touch like the esophagus, it would make my head hurt and all of that, but then it would come back and then make the Chiari act up. So it's awful. So what they had to do during the decompression surgery, they took where the hair is shaved, they took all of that bone out and released my brain. And then they made a man-made muscle and enclosed my brain in that and lifted it up to the proper position. That surgery was awful. I ended up back in the hospital with a leak, but eventually they got it under wrap. It took me about 2 months to get back all the way normal, but I started feeling good about a month and a half where I could get up and move around and actually drive again. And I had this awful haircut, and I asked them, why didn't you shave my whole head? This is awful. So let the healing begin, and life is starting to feel normal again. And I like to say normal-ish for me. My mom says to me, we made it. No, I says to my mom, we made it. We're both all good now. And she agreed. September 2013, received some of the best news ever. Her treatments worked. No sign of cancer anymore. So we were through the roof excited. We both made it through our journeys. She says, I'm good now. Go live your life. And Terrell needs you now. Terrell was my best friend. And he lived in California. So in the words of the late Biggie Smalls, I'm going back to Cali. So I went back to Cali. My job that I had when I lived here the first time paid for me to move back across the country. And I did that. And my best friend, his words were, yes, precious Penelope, you're back. He was so excited that I was back in January. But more bad news came. His cancer has spread, and the doctor said there was not much more that they could do. They told us, consider him in the fourth quarter of the football game. And he told me, I'm ready to go home. And he was from Chicago. So yes, he was physically ready to go back to Chicago with his parents, but I knew what I'm ready to go home meant. So he couldn't fly. So we took a 3-day train trip, he and I. He said that was our slumber party. And we rode to Chicago. I stayed with him a few days. And then I came back to California. He died May 12th, 2014. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. I didn't think I was gonna do this. Lo and behold, I'm talking to my mom and she's like, wow, so sad. And then the next month on Father's Day, my dad calls me and he says, I don't know what's wrong with your mom. She's been standing there staring at the duck and poking it, and she hasn't cooked. And also she went to church and forgot her skirt. And I'm like, something's not right. So he took her to the hospital. They said she had a stroke. When the doctor did the scan and test, it said 20 mini strokes hit her at one time. He said, there's no reason why she's alive other than God. Things changed from that point with my mom. I literally went back to Virginia and I literally slept in the hospital for 2 months. They put us in a double room. I had a bed and I got 3 trays a day. I would not leave my mom's side. In August, I had to come back to work for a couple of weeks, but I was coming back. But within that 2-week period, my mother had more strokes. So I told my dad, let's take her to UVA. Something's wrong. UVA asked for some tests and informed us that the cancer had come back and it had spread to her pancreas, which is why she continued to have the strokes. And from there, it was a fast decline, and my mother passed away August 26, 2014. So I lost both of my best friends 3 months apart. So me keeping moving forward was a little bit hard, but I had to stay strong because I owed it to my mom and Terrell, and my daddy's gonna need me now. That's what I kept saying. So life goes on. I'm in LA, I'm working, I'm handling the grief better than people thought I would. I would have my moments, but through it all, it was peace because I knew both of them didn't have to suffer anymore. So life is going on. I'm living my life. You've got to be kidding me. 2016, I'm at a stoplight. There's a truck behind me. I can see in my rearview mirror that the car behind them is flying up and doesn't appear to be stopping. She is on her cell phone texting. She hits the truck hits me. I said, I probably need to go to the doctor. So I go to the hospital. They say, oh yeah, you've got a slight concussion. I say, okay, that's fine. A couple of days later, I'm at work and the numbers on the screen started scrambling. And so I told them to rush me to the hospital. Before I laugh at a moment, it was Halloween that day. And this is how I went to the emergency room. So you can imagine the looks that I got that day. But we went to the emergency room and I met Dr. Wesley King, and he said to me, your brain has dropped back down. Unfortunately, you will need another decompression surgery. So the impact from the accident knocked my brain out of the mesh net. What Dr. King said, it was nothing that Dr. Barrow did wrong, because at that time they thought taking out more bone was better, but now they've realized because of things like this, you're eggshell basically. So he said that's why the brain was able to drop back down. In the meantime, I walked around looking like this until I could have my surgery. What he did was he took a piece of foam, put it at the base of my neck, and wrapped this around my head to push my brain up temporarily until we were able to schedule the surgery. And so that alleviated the headaches. The left side weakness was there still, but not as bad. It was a little bit more controlled. I said, but the holidays are coming, Dr. King. He says, I do not suggest you try to wait until after the holidays. So here again, the doctor's telling me I can't wait. So then my daddy took his first flight since 1969. I had to bribe him with Disneyland tickets, but he came across the country, and here we go again. I had my second decompression surgery and another jacked up haircut. But I successfully got through that surgery, and it wasn't as bad as the first time. I don't know if it's because he didn't have to remove the bone, number one. He did put in a titanium plate in the back of my head also to support, but it was a little bit easier this time. And it took me about 8 weeks to recover. And Dr. King says to me, go live your life. I'm here if you ever need me. He released me. I'm totally fine. While I'm recovering, I'm laying in the bed and I'm saying, I've survived 2 brain surgeries. Why am I not going after my dreams? So I did. I took a stand-up comedy class, and on April 23rd, 2017, I did my very first comedy show. So I go from Chiari, 2 surgeries, until making people laugh on stage. Life begins to feel normal again with a couple minor interruptions. For the most part, I feel pretty good. I have headaches occasionally. Every now and then, I have to be careful. I know I rode the Matador at Disneyland didn't know it jerked you that much. And so I didn't feel good for a couple of days. And that's just from my head banging around. But for the most part, I am feeling good. My best friend sent me a text, one of the last texts I have from him, and he said, "You should be tired of keeping your talents in your backyard." And he's absolutely right. From that point forward, I haven't looked back. I actually left my job and I am full-time pursuing my comedy and acting career right now because I'm a survivor and there's no reason why I'm not chasing my dreams when I was given a second chance. So I'm doing my shows, thinking I'm a superhero at the top, just living life. The best advice, I know when Ashley asked me to do this, she said, "How do I cope?" And the best advice is self-care. That's how I stayed strong. And I live my life to the fullest. You know, the days I don't feel good, I might take it easy, but I'm not gonna let, like I said in the beginning, I have Chiari. It doesn't have me. I exercise, I go to the spa, I go on vacations, I go to Disney World with my dad. I'm living. So self-care. Again, I have Chiari. It doesn't have me. And that's my journey. The biggest thing I can suggest is, again, listen to your body, demand to be tested. This is one of the most misdiagnosed diseases. And I hope my friend joined this conversation because recently her daughter went to the hospital after not feeling good and found out she had Chiari. And I believe she's in her 20s. And so it's really, and she experienced some of the same things I did growing up, but never knew that she had Chiari. So testing is important. I'm not Superwoman, but I'm fighting Chiari. So that's close enough. Thank you.